Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee meeting on Friday the 20th of September 2019. And could I ask Tracy to do the SEDERUNT, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've got 13 members present, and I have apologies from Councillor Dempster, Councillor Crothers, Councillor McClellan and Councillor Sloan.
Thank you, Tracy. Just to remind people to either switch off their mobile phones or put them on silent. Yes?
Councillor Tate, apologies as well. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks for that. Are there any other apologies? No. Yeah, just to remind people to switch off their phones. This meeting will be recorded and it will be available for the public in the future. Are there any declarations of interest? Archie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I know one of the objectors in item on the HALLMEADOW Place Elm Road one, but I've never seen her for years, so it's just to say that I do know her. And on item 5, I had a phone call from the applicant, but as I said to him, it wasn't in my ward anyway. He thought I was a ward member in there, so I said no, I told him the other 4 who he should contact.
Okay. John?
Item 5, I think I know one of the, Mr. Roxburgh Senior, I think, used to work at the same, well, as manager at the same plant that I used to work. But I don't think I've been away that long, I don't think it's any material consideration.
Any more? I have a declaration on item 5 as well, which I wasn't aware of the Roxburghs because the report mentions senior and junior. I realised that the senior, Mr. Roxburgh Senior, is the same as John. We knew him at our old place for work. Because I'll declare an interest, I will remove myself from the chair and we will get somebody from the floor to chair that particular item. Move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are we agreed on the minutes from the last meeting? Agreed. Thank you. Right, I'll just ask Tracy to take us through the procedures.
Thank you, Chairman. The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard is as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and such members should withdraw from the committee chamber after making their presentation, applicants or their agents, and representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national or major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the committee when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, and members will have already read the report. After all representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the planning application or where appropriate, agree a recommendation to be made to full council, who will determine the application.
Thank you, Tracy. We'll move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is the erection of 130 dwelling houses, formation of accesses, internal road and path layouts, SUDS pond, landscaping and associated works at land between HALLMEADOW Place and Elm Road, Annan. Application number is 19/0639/full, and the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. And here to give us the report is Andrew Robertson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the application site is situated in the south of Annan between Elm Road and HALLMEADOW Place. So just to the north of the site is the Category C listed Longmeadow House, beyond which is Elmvale School, Annan Academy and the railway station. And there's a scheduled monument to the south of the site, which is a Roman camp, and beyond which is back of the hill, which is a small building group. And the high street, as you can see, is to the north of the site there. So this is the application site. So I'll start with the photographs first. So this is looking south across the site. You've got Elm Road, which has hedge planting along it just here. And this is looking southeast across the site. So this is where you just about see housing, which is part of HALLMEADOW Place. You can just see a stone wall which separates this site from the grounds of Longmeadow House. This is in the southeastern corner of the site, so this is looking northwest across the site. So that's the housing belonging to HALLMEADOW Place. And this is looking north. So you've got Elm Road. It's in the same position. So you've got Elm Road to the right there, and the boundary treatment, which is in the form of a hedge. And that just shows you Elm Road looking up it. So you take note of the width, the current width of the road. And this is looking from the northeastern corner down. So this is as you're sort of coming out of Annan, heading towards back of the hill. This is taken from HALLMEADOW Place. So this is at the end of the cul-de-sac, and there is proposed to be an access road going into the site from this direction. And note the land level changes in the western part of the site, which leads up into the main part of the site where the housing is proposed. And it's in the same position, but looking towards, you can see Longmeadow House just there. And that's looking southeast, which is effectively in the direction towards the Roman camp. And this is from the back of the properties, the nearest properties to the site. So this is the view that those properties have of the site at present. The application has been in accordance with the site allocation, required a master plan submitted, and after doing contextual analysis of the site and of relevant policy, this was the final master plan that was submitted as part of pre-application discussion. So it shows areas of proposed housing, road layouts, areas of open space, for example, and that has informed the proposed site layout, which we've got main access road through the site, which is also to act as a bus route, secondary roads leading off from there. You've got areas of central open space, for example, with other what are termed as pocket parks to add amenity to the scheme. Elm Road itself is proposed to have a footpath and cycleway with it, and a landscaping corridor, and it's a SUDS basin. I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a second. That's proposed in the northwestern corner of the site, which, as you would have noted from the photos, is the lowest part of the site. So this is the proposed road layout. So a pretty conventional road to act as the bus route, and the rest of the proposed roads are to act as shared surfacing, leading off from there in the form of block paving. Proposed there's requirement to improve Elm Road, really to get the provision of a footpath. This is the access to there's the proposed access to the site just here. This is more for illustrative purposes at this stage, so that roads in particular could see that the improvement works could function and could be or can be accommodated. So this is the site that's adjacent to, well, forms part of Longmeadow House. So it is proposed to have a footway. I'm trying to. It's not showing up very well, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's not. No, there you go. It's. I'll try and point a bit further forward. Scheme is subject to landscaping as well. So this shows the areas of landscaping and areas of open space in more detail. Proposed boundary treatment, which is effected in the form of fencing. So the rear of dwellings, generally 1.8 metre high fence, and lower treatment to the front. And I noticed in the description of the development, it refers to a SUDS pond. It's actually it should be a SUDS basin. It's a detention basin, so it isn't proposed to have water in it. It'll effectively just be a gravel area at the bottom of it. So it isn't supposed to be a pond. It is a basin, and there's the details of that. So you can see it in the top of the slide, and these are cross sections through that basin to show that. These are the proposed land levels. I appreciate that due to the scale, it's difficult to see that. You may have noticed in paragraph 4.22 of the report, I've mentioned about site levels and retaining walls, and I've zoomed in on the area here to show the area in question. So effectively, some of the properties, due to the required land levels, will require an element of retaining wall and boundary treatment on top. That's shown as the indicated red line, shows the areas where retaining wall is proposed. In terms of sections through the site, so this is section AA, which is actually north to south in the eastern part of the site. So the levels will be relatively flat when they're finalised in this area of the site, or proposed to be. You can see the red line indicates existing levels, so you can see sort of extent in this area of the site. It's actually proposed to raise the levels to get the required levels. Section BB is shown in a west to east direction in the southeastern part of the site. And the section below here, so CC, that's in the northwestern quarter. So this is where the levels start to change a little bit more, and there is a requirement to do this. You can see the red line as the existing levels, and the extent in this part of the site to lower the land levels to raise that. To lower the levels to form the finished floor levels of the houses. And the sections here, EE, for example, that is through plots. Okay, I'm trying to point so I can show you where it is. It's this area here of the site, which is the area. You can see these plots here are required to be at a lower level than the plots to the north, and again with section FF as well in a similar part of the site. I've included all the street elevations, but they are relatively similar, so I'll quickly nip through these. So effectively, the scheme is generally semi-detached housing, forming of render and combination of render and brick to the wall. So effectively, the street elevations, this starts in the northeastern corner, and it follows its way around to effectively where the area of open space is. So I've included these just in case you want to go back and look at these in detail as part of the discussion. And it's not until we go around. So this is in the southwestern corner of the site. So you can see the bottom one is where the secondary road is actually going to meet the main road in the corner. So you can see the element of land level change that's required because of the site topography. And finally, this is the proposed phasing of the development. So this is what's proposed in terms of the construction and what would be proposed in each stage of that. So effectively, it's starting in the southwestern corner and moving its way to the northeastern corner. So phase one would involve the construction of the houses, about 20 units in the SUDS basin and the main road, as well as Elm Road improvement works, moving through to phases 2 and 3, and then phase 4 would have the main area of open space, and then finishing up with phase 5 before phase 6, which is actually subject to a separate planning application as it's a different developer. So after assessing the application, officers consider that it is acceptable and it's approved subject to the conditions stated.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions for the case officer? Ivor and then Archie.
A couple of points. Is this prime agricultural land? And the second one, the SUDS basin pond. Now it's in the northwest corner. When we saw the photographs of the was it cereal seeds, they were yellowed. Now that's a sign of it's really wet in that area. Now, are we going to create a flooding issue whereby the suds all runs into there on a heavy rain and then go into other people's gardens?
Andrew.
In the first instance, the site is an allocated housing site. So in terms of agricultural land, that will have been looked at as part of the site allocation. So I haven't gone into detail on that in the report for that reason. In terms of the drainage, the issue of and concerns about flooding was raised early in the process. And in fact, actually, SEPA recommended that, and both the flood risk management team have said that no development should occur in the northwestern corner of that site for that reason, because it does poorly drain. And the engineers have, after doing the drainage impact assessment, the flood risk assessment, that has been concluded to be the best area for that. And if the SUDS basin operates properly, it shouldn't involve any flooding into properties.
Archie.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to raise. There's two roads issues. Andrew, Elm Road for one thing. I can't remember seeing if it was been widened. Certainly there's a footpath going in, but certainly the widening issue could be a particular issue. And the other thing is, and I see in the paper that you're asking for a road traffic management plan for access to the site. I think that may be an issue if they're coming across from the academy, the railway station across there, and certainly from down into what we call the Elmvale area of Annan, into that particular site, especially if there's big wagons. So I'm pleased to see you've got a traffic management plan being asked for, but can you advise on the Elm Road what changes are going to be made, because that is very much a run through for certain individuals, and they go at speed even though it's a 30 mile an hour area.
Andrew.
Okay, as you can see, there's a photograph at Elm Road. It is restricted in width, and for my own site visit when I was there, it was pretty obvious that only one car can go at a time. So it clearly needs to be widened to improve that. One of the things that was discussed earlier at pre-application discussions is obviously there's a hedge along there. What is proposed is that will have to be removed and replanted further back, so that there is then the opportunity to create a footpath. And what's actually proposed, I think it will be going further forward. So as you can see, it's actually proposed to create what's been called a woodland walk. So it's a footpath. It's like a landscape corridor, effectively, to try and create a connection to clearly to back of the hill. It's not a great situation at the minute. There's no footpath, and to be honest, that red marking along the road from my own site visit I can see it being problematic. So this is an opportunity. This creates an opportunity to do that. So effectively, it's to widen the road so it's an appropriate width, but to create the footpath as well. But the hedge will have to be removed and replanted further back to accommodate that. The rest of Elm Road to the north of this is still subject to further discussions as part of the planning application for that scheme.
Jim McComb and then Jane Maitland.
Thanks, Chair. Page 39, Andrew, 4.30. You have highlighted amenity concerns with 3 properties there. Now, it would appear that there is quite a depth of excavation required. Are there any concerns that this may exacerbate problems of drainage, that the excavation may indeed intersect the water table? Andrew?
I can't answer whether it'll affect the water table or not, because that's really beyond my expertise. In terms of the land levels, I believe the engineers have looked at this very, very closely, and the reason for the levels, so we've been advised, is to make sure that the site drains properly. That will be in terms of road drainage as well. So that is the reason for the level, and I've tried to take that into account when considering why the levels are as they are proposed. But the properties in question, yes, and it's just my professional opinion here. I just think that it's a bit of an undesirable situation that if you've got a 1.5 metre high retaining wall with a 1.8 metre high fence on it, it is going to be quite prominent. And I've highlighted that in the report. But I have also tried to balance that and look at it from a justification of the scheme as a whole.
Right. Second point, Andrew, 4.53 at the top of page 45. It states there that the contaminated land officer has requested further investigation in the form of a remedial strategy. Now, I would not have thought that a remedial strategy is an investigative procedure. Andrew?
Yeah, it's actually further considered as part of condition 3. So effectively, it will require a site-specific ground investigation report to be prepared first, together then with any remediation strategy. So it is covered in a bit more detail in the conditions. So the report first, and then whatever the report finds, if there's any remediation required, then there's a requirement for that to be carried out, and that's in condition 3, or recommended condition 3.
So condition 3 is actually much clearer than the statement at the top of page 45.
It says it's requested further investigation in the form of a remedial strategy, and that's the terminology that the contaminated land officer has used, but it does cover investigation and remediation.
Jane?
Thank you. This development is a wee bit of away from the centre of Annan, and I noticed that much emphasis is placed upon the pedestrian access. But what about cycling? We've had representations about cycling, and it's not entirely clear to me about how the linkages are made and how safe cycling can be improved through this. So if I could have a bit of an explanation looking at these as to where the cycling connections are, please.
Andrew?
The main cycling connection is through the width of this path down Elm Road is supposed to be 3 metres wide. Yeah, it's just there. Yeah. Yeah. So that is proposed to be 3 metres wide. In terms of cycling through the site, obviously there's the primary road that could be used, as well as connections through the secondary roads, which are supposed to be shared surface streets, so it should be for pedestrian, cyclists and cars as well. So the through road creates that permeability through the site for all transport mode. But in terms of to the south and particularly back of the hill, then that footpath alongside Elm Road, or improved footpath, is proposed to act as a walkway and a cycleway.
But can I have a clarity about the fact that the pedestrian way is narrowed?
I'll bring David in. He'll
Thank you.
explain a bit
Thank
more.
you.
think another point to make, because I've obviously been aware that there's a late representation which has been circulated around all members. The key issue with that is actually the land to the north that just goes off the page there is a separate planning application which is not before you today by Loreburn Housing Association for 27 houses and the conversion of the Longmeadow House. Now that actually includes the critical link for the footpath and the pedestrian side of things to get to the centre of the town. Being an Annan resident, I have to say that it is actually pretty close to the centre. It's also easily walkable to the two schools, the Elmvale School and the Academy, and the railway station. So the site, I think, has been chosen because of its connectivity compared to the alternatives of perhaps going beyond the bypass, the 75. It's much closer to the centre as far as that goes. This linkage from this site is going to be dependent on the Loreburn site coming in as well. So that's something on our radar, and certainly Andrew's dealing with that one as well. And it's still subject to a number of negotiations to get that sorted, but we're well aware of that.
John Young.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Maitland's already asked some of the points I was going to bring up. And I'll just quickly ask, will there be any separation between the cycleway and the footpath on the 3 metre width? And the other question I have, the photograph showed a very nice dry stone wall at the side of Elm Road. Will that be completely retained?
Andrew.
In terms of the first question, the footpath it's a shared cycleway and footpath, and the width of 3 metres is sufficient to include that. My roads colleagues have advised me that an absolute minimum is 2 metres, but in this case they're proposing a 3 metre along that section. In terms of the second point about the wall, the majority of the wall is proposed to be retained, apart from a small section to include, if you just look at the top of the slide, there's 1 or 2 connections through proposed in the form of a road to Longmeadow House site, which was at the request of officers to include permeability through, as well as a footpath link, as you can see, just to the north of the Pocket Park. And again, and that's to try and have permeability through the site and some of the areas of open space that are proposed within that development as well. But the majority of that wall, as you can see, apart from those 2 cut-throughs, if you like, would be retained.
So there'd be a physical barrier of this wall between the footpath and the road?
No, where the access road is to be formed would actually, the wall effectively is along where the red line is along the top of the site. So where that red line boundary is along the top, that denotes the line of the wall, and that's where it is, and it ends obviously where, yeah, and that's effectively the boundary with the other development site.
Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, could I just go to point 1.5? I note that there will be 4 by 4 bedroomed wheelchair accessible houses. So following on from Councillor Maitland and Councillor Young's points, the paths are obviously causing a bit of concern. 3 metres isn't hugely wide, as we know. Will that be accessible for wheelchair users, electric wheelchair users, you know, alongside cyclists and walkers as well, Andrew? Thank you.
Andrew.
Just find where type F housing is so I can show you where they are. Let me just have a quick look. Well, there's 4. There's type F. So there's one here, and there's the other one here. Yeah. So that's one, and there's the other one. Again, with parking at the front proposed as well. So.
You might be better standing at the podium.
Probably might be, yeah.
So is that going to be accessible for the purchasers or renters of those properties? Can they access the path to get to Annan Town Centre independently, for example? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just demonstrate with the mouse. I think that might be easier. With any sort of footpath. footpath here, and in terms of crossways, there would be a crossway here over what's a shared surface square. And you can see there's a footpath that goes all the way around. Yeah, so in terms of this property here, there's the footpath, straight onto the footpath, and you'd effectively follow all the way over the crossing way, and then out to here where there's supposed to be a crossing, which details would be subject to the road construction consent, and then connecting into what, as David has said, would be the missing link and further details part of the other planning application. Again, in terms of this property here, this is supposed to be a shared surface, so there's no reason why not. And then there is a connectivity onto the improved cycleway footpath, and then again following the same route out.
Does that help, Pauline?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I just think obviously it needs to be considered in the final plans just to make sure it is accessible and it's clearly marked for people. If we're going to be building disabled houses, which we do need to be doing, which is fantastic, but we do need to make sure that people can have access, either being pushed or electric. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David.
The only other thing to raise at that stage is that this is really the planning application. The final detail of the road layout is subject to a roads construction consent application to roads colleagues, where all their standards have to be met before you have an adoptable road. So they would certainly ensure that all the relevant crossings and as much flat access as possible would be included.
David McKee.
There's a bit of confusion, it's maybe just in my head, but could you show the photograph of Elm Road with the wall and where the footpath is going to be, please?
Andrew.
Site actually starts here. So this is Lowburn Housing Association site. This is what would be, this is what's subject to further consideration as part of the other planning application we've got. So the details are still to be finalised for that. The application site starts about here. So this is where the access road into the site is roughly positioned. And you can see there's hedge, there's the hedge all the way along. Now, let's put the other photograph here. So effectively what's proposed is the hedge will have to be removed with a new hedge planting set further back along here, and the footpath would follow the line along here, and between the footpath and the road there's proposed landscaping to provide a separation. So this is the location of the proposed footway and cycleway.
Just for the avoidance of doubt, that Drystone Dyke you're saying on the right hand side of the road, that's not part of the application site and is unaffected by this application.
If there's Who's wanting it? Oh, sorry, Councillor Blake, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. The road link in Tannin, you meant, or I should say that the footpath link in Tannin, you mentioned that was dependent on Lorburns on the application. On the odd chance that either the application didn't get through or that Lorburn decided not to build, would this mean that this development would be remote, with no proper links into Annan?
Andrew? I think I should say for the avoidance of doubt, at the minute there is a footpath actually proposed between the two of what is a 2 metre width. Now obviously we will have seen the late representation that's come around suggesting whether that actually should be 3 metres, and that's something that I'm taking up further with our roads officers to actually find out what is the width. It's a minimum for a cycleway and a footway is 2 metres, so it's at that minimum. It's whether we actually now, taking on board the comments in this representation, actually look at stipulating that this should actually be 3 metres, and something that we'll be considering further. But just for the avoidance of doubt, at the moment, there is a footway link proposed at the front of that site and is being stipulated. And I actually showed the plan of it. Well, yeah. Yeah, so this is what, yeah, so if it didn't actually, happen, it would have to be the developer as part of this scheme we would stipulate to do that as part of what we're asking for in condition 15, which actually requires more details of the on-road improvements anyway, and we would stipulate that this would then be done as part of this. I think, let me just check the phasing plan. It should all be in phase 1 anyway. Let me just, sorry, I appreciate I'm going quite quickly here. Yeah, so there you go, actually. If you look at the red, it's actually proposed to be included as phase 1 as part of this development. So it needs to be developed as part of this application anyway.
So, sorry, just to clarify that, if for some reason the Lowburn one didn't go, it would be part of the condition on this application. And is that quite clearly stipulated in this as a recommendation?
It's in condition 15, all of Elm Road improvements. So it is actually required to be as part of the phasing plan, which again is conditioned as well for development to be in accordance with the phasing plan. The improvement to the northern part of Elm Road is actually required as part of the first phase of the development indicated in red. So it should be implemented. As I say, we'll be requesting the details as part of condition 15 anyway, in the event that the Lowburn scheme may not go ahead or wasn't approved.
Ivor?
Is there sufficient space within the road boundary for the improvements next to the purple patch? So that, you know, because we could actually put a condition on here, which now I live in, or I used to represent the ward where a certain raider of lost titles was involved, and he came across was it a Cambridge formula for selling land to make land usable, and you could actually put a ransom strip in there, or is there sufficient space to actually achieve what needs to be done to allow this development to work?
Andrew?
I believe there is, and that's why Roads asked for the plan that I showed, showing that, which is illustrative at this time, but it demonstrates that there is the space required to put that in.
Okay, if there's no more questions for the case officer, we don't have anybody speaking today, but we do have the agent, if I'm correct, is it Paul Moffat here? And I could call him forward if any members wish to ask him questions. Or are we content? Yeah, please come forward. We've got one of the members like to ask you a question. There's a microphone button on. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. There is a degree of excavation required, particularly in the western part of the site. Are there any concerns that this may exacerbate problems of drainage?
Well, again, it's really an engineering question. But I would say the engineer has looked at that area very closely, and there has been a flood risk assessment and comments from SEPA and the planning officer as well. And part of the whole design is to consider drainage for the whole site and the impact on, or potential impact, on the adjoining site. And there are conditions attached to all the recommendations within the flood risk assessment, which we will have to adhere to ensure there is no risk of drainage problems affecting the other site or our site. I don't know what more I can say, I'm sorry, not as an engineer.
Jane?
Could I possibly ask you, there's nothing in this, unless I've completely missed it, there's nothing in this report about consideration that was given to green energy. And I wonder if you'd thought about at any stage a neighbourhood scheme. Yeah, I just wonder whether that had ever come under consideration, because I know within our LDP that we're looking to have resource efficient proposals.
Yeah, just to say that obviously to get an approved SAP rating these days, then green energy is more or less a must for new development. So there's certainly a requirement for us to put in solar voltaic panels for all the houses. And they will exceed, the amount of green energy they produce is over 15% the requirement in terms of the Dumfries and Galloway planning legislation, as I understand it. So yes, we are using green energy.
Archie?
Yeah, I just more or less the same point, talk about heating and things like that, because heating is probably more important than the energy, but we're aware of the energy side of things. So is there things like ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps being included in the build of this, or is there a local heating system that could be used on the site?
Well, yes, all these things are possible. We have a client and we have a client's brief, and the proposal for this site is that the heating and the fuel, if you like, will be combination boilers in this instance. So we have other sites, as I'm sure you're aware, where we have ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps and things. It's not a requirement for us for this site.
A missed opportunity, a real missed opportunity.
If there's no more questions for the agent, members, we're now in session. You can please take your seat again. Thank you. Jane, then Archie.
Thank you for that. I think with the information that we've been given and seeing the pictures, I think in terms of how this is designed, actually I really want to say that it's probably going to be quite an attractive looking development. So I'm enthusiastic about what it looks like. I am disappointed that there isn't a stipulation, that we have not made a stipulation for green energy. I think there could have been more, and so I'm a bit sad about that. I don't know. I presume we can't condition that at this stage. It's all too late. I'm quite happy to propose that we agree it. I think there's no particular difficulty with it, but I would leave it to other members to hear what they have to say about the possibility of making representations about energy. I'm sure members have other things to say about the paths.
Archie?
For once I agree with everything what Jane actually says. I think it is quite an attractive offer. I think under the planning guidance that we have at the moment, we cannot sort of stipulate that, but I think there is an opportunity here to discuss with the applicant if there was a way of having more green energy in the housing scheme as is, because they're not been built yet, but there is a potential there for opportunity to discuss that with Cunningham, and I know that Cunningham are open for discussions, but as Jane says, I think it will be a relatively good new application and site, and it actually enhances the area for walkers coming down from the back of the hill. So with that in mind here, I would recommend we go with the recommendations.
David McKee.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I've no issue with what's being said, but just as a matter of information, my daughter and son-in-law are getting a house done up and they're gutting it, and there's a guy putting insulation in, and he says he's got it in his house, and he almost never uses heating in the house because the insulation's that good. So you're talking about all these different things, and I would hope that they'll be built to a high standard with this insulation that's being used nowadays. But it's a totally different ball game altogether. I'm quite happy to second Archie.
Okay. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. I've no difficulty with the application. My one is a very slight concern is still because it's dependent on another application. And on page 50, on paragraph 15, I don't know if it maybe should be expanded. The fully developed and detailed plans for road, footpath and cycle paths on Elms Road, just to cover that area. As it is just now, it's mainly for Elm Road, which could be considered as a roadway.
But we've got this application before us, and that's what we're actually determining today. You know, I mean, what happens with Lorburn, but I'll let David explain a little bit more.
Thanks, Chair. don't have a problem with that. If the committee would like, for the avoidance of doubt, I mean, it does just say that Elm Road improvement works, which implicitly includes everything: road, footway, cycleway. But if members would be happier for just on that A to be expanded to explicitly state to include footways and cycleways, then I'm happy to put that in.
I'm certainly quite happy to move that.
Jane?
Could I possibly have a confirmation from the officers? There is no possibility of us being held over a barrel here with one development, the northern development, wishing to exclude activity and going across from the other development. We've been here before, and I would like to be absolutely certain that there is no possibility of the topmost development stopping access from the bottom development.
Given that these are two RSLs and the whole development, we are slightly disappointed, as you'll probably noted from Andrew's report, that it hasn't necessarily been viewed properly as a master plan, but nonetheless there is a master plan for the two sites. We wanted to make sure there was that connectivity there. As far as we reasonably can be, we are certain that because of who the developers are and what the application is, it will work. And there is that condition 15 which will ensure that in the unlikely event that the Lowerburn scheme doesn't proceed, given that they are funded to do this, it's part of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. So for all those reasons, I really do believe that subject to them coming up with an acceptable scheme, that is going to work as well. I don't think there's any particular risk with this instance of us getting into another raider of the lost titles situation.
Are members content with that? Taking on board what Councillor Blake and Councillor Maitland put forward? Agreed? Tracy, could you just remind us what we have decided?
Yes, members have agreed to approve the application subject to the conditions in the report, with the amendment to condition 15A to be expanded to include the footways and cycleways on Elm Road.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. We move on to agenda item number 5, which I will leave the room. I take it I'll have to leave the room while the members decide who to chair. Okay, so I'll leave it in your capable hands.
Can I ask members to please nominate a chairman for item 5? So just
I nominate Councillor Ivor Hislop.
Anyone else? Second, Councillor Hislop.
Right. Now, see if I can remember. Now move on to the erection of dwelling house and installation of septic tank and SOAKAWay at GLEBE, STEADING, BORELAND. Full application. And is it Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to present this case today. As you can see, it's Lindsay Cameron's application. As part of agile working, she doesn't work on Fridays, so if someone tells you that agile working is always a good thing, that's not always the case. So you just need to tolerate me, I'm afraid, for the time being of this presentation. It's an application for a single house in the countryside, as per 1.1 of the report. It's before you because the application has been made by an immediate relative of one of the case officers employed by our service. You've got the location plan, as you can see. It's just to the southeast of Boreland, and that's in the back road up to Corrie Common. Moving on more closely, you have a proposed site plan. Proposed dwelling house is within the area outlined in red, so you can see there's an existing group of buildings already there, but we'll come on to that. Looking at the proposed elevations, it's what's been described to me previously as a longship style house, so fairly vernacular, traditional proportions, steep roof pitch, you've got timber cladding here, etc. So quite a modern, bold design. Floor plans, not really showing a huge deal, but just a fairly well-sized detached dwelling house. 1.5 storey in general design. I think I counted yesterday, it had 3 bedrooms to it, so it's a reasonable size. This shows the land holding at Glebe Steading there. I know there's yellow lines in this, but for the avoidance of doubt, the blue line denotes the land holding at Glebe Steading itself. The red star superimposed in the aerial picture shows the location of the proposed dwelling house. One of the key issues you'll have noticed in this case is the principle of the development, and that's covered in some depth. Now, one of the issues which is considered to be pivotal by the case officer to her recommendation is the extent and presence of both owned and rented land. So for the avoidance of doubt, you have the owned land here in the northeast of the picture in blue, and that's the same as the last picture you saw, just in a different scale, which is also designed to show the location of the rented land, which in relative terms is down to the southwest there. So you can see that area outlined in red, and that, when you see reference to rented land in the report, it's meaning that area. Looking at the actual pictures of the application site, this is a view to the west. It's from the access track which exists at the moment, and it's looking towards the application site. Now, I know the red pointer is not working, so I won't even try it, but you can see the agricultural building on the left. The proposed dwelling house would be located approximately directly behind that white van that you can see, which is the pool vehicle. Moving closer in, this is almost 180 degrees in the opposite direction. A more panoramic view, you can see that small timber building on the right hand side. The proposed dwelling house would be located between this viewing spot and that building. So it is clustered. You can also see this is swinging around almost 90 degrees, so it's looking west from the application site. That's the proposed location, so it's a fairly good fit within the landscape, I would suggest. And certainly when I look at the report, particularly at 4.26, the case officer's got no concerns about siting, design or finishes of this proposal. So that's not the pivotal issue in this case. We're happy that complies with the development plan. This is a view north from the application site. It's showing an existing dwelling house that's also located at that unit, and that's again referenced in the report. The polytunnels, for the avoidance of doubt on the left hand side, are associated with that dwelling house. When you look at the report, it's obviously been considered in some depth against the requirements of LDP policy H3 housing in the countryside. In this case, you can see from the commentary within that this application is made in terms of there having an essential need demonstrable at this location within the countryside. Now, the officer's report goes through it at some depth, and I'm not going to bore you with repeating that, but when you look at the conclusions at 4.23, it says, while a new dwelling on the site may be desirable for the applicants in terms of their personal circumstances or preferences, it has not been demonstrated that there is currently a business with a realistic degree of permanence due to the amount of rented land, and that's what I mentioned earlier in the presentation. In addition, there's a lack of a medium to long-term business plan, and the present financial position also creates significant doubt as to whether a dwelling house is essential at this location for rural business needs. Furthermore, the case officer believes it has not been demonstrated in labour and operational terms as a genuine essential need for a second dwelling at Glebe Steading, as required by policy H3, and there's supporting supplementary guidance as well within the present LDP. So it's considered on those grounds to be contrary to the terms of the LDP. When you look at other key considerations, siting and design, access and servicing, there are lesser concerns about that. So it really is coming down to the principle of this development, I would suggest, at this location. But again, when you refer to 4.29, the conclusion is that this is contrary to the development plan, and in the absence of material considerations of significant weight to indicate otherwise, the recommendation is that the application be refused for the reasons set out in the report. And I'm happy to answer any questions because I realise there's a lot of information within that report that I haven't covered just now.
Any questions for the officer? Councillor Blake.
I'd like your opinion on this one. It's actually not so much the or it's just partly the content of it. Paragraph 420 on page 62, it's the reference to Mr. Roxburgh Senior. I personally feel that this is kind of inappropriate language to use on a building report, referring to his retirement age and the fact it will prevent him from carrying on much longer. I think in this day and age that sort of language we should be careful. I personally retired from the police service 17 years ago, and albeit I'm not chasing sheep daily well, not too often anyway. I'm still working. I don't know that we should be making reference to things like that in a planning report.
In response to that, I hear what the member's saying. It was only to give all members fullest information when making the decision. So I apologise if that comes across as inappropriate or offensive in any way.
Councillor Maitland.
Just to say, yes, I think I support Councillor Blake just in the way it's written. I don't think it was absolutely tactful. Can I ask about paragraph 4.12, the development management practice note? Again, I remember seeing this before, and we have discounted rented land as opposed to owned land before. What's the status of that? Is that Scottish Government practice note? Is that our own practice note? Has that been through the system fully?
My understanding is the status of that is as non-statutory supplementary guidance, so it does not form part of the LDP, but it is guidance that's regularly used in assessment of planning applications.
Councillor Driver.
Thanks, Chair. It's just coming back to something that was agreed a few years ago. I remember something similar where a family, the father was retiring and he was given permission to build a house on the land because he was retiring and his sons were taking over from the business, and that actually went through. So I'm just wondering what the difference between this is and that particular thing. I'm sure it was in the Middleby Waterbeck area, which is not that far away from this particular application site. So I'm just wondering what the difference is between that when somebody, and I would imagine it's down to the occupation of the father, who was not in the agricultural industry, but the father of the previous one was.
The application has been made for a new dwelling house in the countryside in terms of there being essential need here, agricultural need for this dwelling house. It can also be rural business need, but clearly in this case it's agricultural. And they've put forward a justification. The difficulty here is we're not looking at a retirement succession type dwelling house. It's not that element of the policy. We're looking at something different. We have to assess what's in front of us. You can see particularly if you look at paragraph 4.14 on page 60, the case officer clearly has misgivings about the supporting information and doesn't feel that that renders the proposal in accordance with your development plan. That has been put to the applicant. The applicant's obviously got a different view. So they've had the chance to look at their submission and decide what it is they want to submit, what is it they're asking for, and what information do they want to submit in support of that. So I'm satisfied that the case officer has had the full information in front of her, and the applicant's been given the opportunity to marshal their case and submit it knowing what the concerns are. It's just, as with any planning application, we're simply forced to deal with what's in front of us on the day.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I'm a bit confused with this one as well, to be quite honest with you. And I can kind of see where LDP2 comes into it, but you're talking about a young family that's trying to make a go of it at the end of the day. We're kind of ruling them out straight away. We're saying, look, you've only been in the game 2 years, there's no long-term prospects of you doing anything within the farming industry. We should be actually applauding people going into farming now, because it's one of these industries that it's very much fallen on its face, So, and that aside, that's my kind of take on that at the end of the day. What is the planning officer's experience within the agricultural industry? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. If it's what's my personal experience or professional experience within agriculture,
I'll make that clear, sorry. What is the council officer, the planning officer's role within that, i.e. what is their knowledge and experience within the agricultural sector? Because within this, you're making reference to a lot of points that are from the agricultural sector. So what is the experience? Where's the professional experience within that? Sorry.
Well, Chair, can I just say that's veering into slightly dangerous territory. Case officers are professional planning officers who have to look at it in the planning merits. Not that it's of any relevance to this, but the case officer is actually, her father is a farmer. So I think she actually knows more about most.
Yeah, thanks for that reply, but it didn't really answer the question. Thank you.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. 4.18, there is a comment in the report there that there was no livestock in the sheds. Well, this was the month of June. I would not have expected livestock in the sheds at that time of the year. Lambing takes place much earlier in the year than that, and it may well be that perhaps in the month of April or March there may well have been stock in the sheds. But to me, it is not unusual for the sheds to be empty of livestock in June.
I think that's more of a sort of statement rather than a question to Mr. Duncan, because...
The question is it surprising that the sheds were empty of livestock?
Chair, the way I was reading that, and obviously I've got a role in editing reports as well, when I looked at that, that was almost saying what the case officer witnessed when she visited the site. And okay, there's maybe nothing unusual in that, but I think the key thing is when you're in the first sentence, it says at the time of the officer's site visit in June 2019, which is claimed to be part of the busy operational period at GLEBE STEADING. So, you know, I think she was expecting to go out and see more activity there. And as she said, there was very little activity. I mean, we can't take a judgment from that, obviously. It's just expressing surprise at something that appears to fly contrary to the submitted supporting statements and so on.
I take it, it is purely a description of the steading as found on that visit. Thank you.
I suppose one question I have is, when you actually look at a viable farming business or farming operation, what do you take into account? Because I can think of numerous agricultural holdings across Dumfries and Galloway, which if they didn't have rented land, and rented land is part of the agricultural way in the south of Scotland, they wouldn't actually be viable because they couldn't operate. So how do you say the business isn't viable when my understanding is that there are books and sets of books that show that it is viable? There are also labour units required from the SAC report that shows that it does require 2 labour units. And I'm not sure, is there any opportunities in Boreland to actually build a dwelling house, or is it a small building group, or not suitable as a small building group? Because this is common agricultural practice. You know, speaking from experience, I had 140 acres and we rented 250 acres, and that was on a yearly basis, and we needed that to make it work. Now, this is in a short-term assured tenancy, and through national policy, you can't get a long-term tenancy now because of the right to buy, etc. And landowners aren't going down that way. So do we need to actually consider that when we're looking at these farms now as an exception to policy?
I'll try and capture those points. What you're looking at in principle, your principal considerations when looking at planning an application of this nature are firstly LDP policy H3, housing in the countryside, which doesn't give you a huge amount. It gives you essentially a list of bullet points. One of those is if there's an essential need for rural business or agriculture requiring an on-site full-time residential presence, and that's essentially the nub of the issue that we're looking at today. The key thing is the supplementary guidance which is adopted at the moment. Now, I know LDP2 is coming at us like a train, but we've still got LDP at the moment and the adopted supplementary guidance. So I've got that open in front of me, and obviously recognises that farming continues to be a significant component of the rural economy. That's clear. It's important that planning policy continues to support the operational needs of farming enterprises too. And then it says whether a house is considered to be essential will depend on the specific needs of the farm concerned and not the personal preferences or circumstances of the individuals involved. In terms of what you need, it then goes on to say the presence of a business in the rural area is not in itself justification for a house. The material factors which will determine whether there is a genuine need for a new house include the scale, viability and detail of the farming business or operation, the labour requirements, including the need for specialist workers and the level of attention needed outside normal hours, and the existing residential accommodation available to the farm business and other development opportunities on the farm or holding. So in these cases, it says, and I'm just reading from the guidance that's adopted, favourable consideration will only be afforded to those proposals where the applicant is able to demonstrate that a new house is essential for the proper functioning of the farm or rural business, and there is clearly an established need for a worker to be readily available at most times. Secondly, there is clear evidence that the proposed enterprise has been planned on a sound financial basis and that the farm or rural business is economically viable. The need relates to a full-time farm worker or one who is mainly involved in agriculture or the running of the rural business. There is no appropriate available alternative accommodation or economically viable development opportunities available on the landholding associated with the farm or rural business or nearby settlement. And finally, the need for a house is not a direct consequence of the recent severance of a house from the agricultural holding and its resultant loss to agriculture or the rural business, except when severance arises as a result of a compulsory purchase order. For the purposes of the policy, recent severance is taken to be 10 years from completion of the house that is being severed from the land holding. So when we're looking at cases like this, that's what we're putting to applicants. That's the published guidance. We set our stall out and then it's for them to put justification forward. The question about rented land is covered in the practice note, and it's clear that we need to have a degree of permanence when we're looking at long-term viability, business viability. We need to have a degree of comfort there. We have had this supported in previous appeal cases, taking that stance. So basically, the requirements in the guidance are set out in the supplementary guidance to the LDP, and we expect applicants to follow that and provide an adequate justification in terms of that policy. I hope that helps answer most of the question. The other question I didn't get back to on, if members are asking if I've got any agricultural qualification or experience, the answer is no.
Maybe just to calm that one down a bit, I remember being at a public inquiry and being asked what qualifications I had in town and country planning. I said I had no formal ones, but I had 8 years' experience of taking decisions, which didn't please the guy who asked me the question. So what we're really saying is the evidence that has been put forward doesn't tick the boxes currently. But if there was evidence that they could show, then...
The view is essentially the case officer's looked at it in some depth and her reasoning is presented in your report. Her view is she's assessed it all, she's looked at it, there's been communication, she doesn't think this adds up and accords with the terms of your development plan and therefore it's recommended for refusal. The applicant, on the other hand, thinks I've basically submitted enough here, there's a clear justification for this and you should grant me permission.
If there's no other questions, we're in session. Members, Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. And just taking all that into consideration about what members have been saying and the questions that have been asked, I don't see of any sort of planning reason that we should go with anything other than the recommendations on this.
If there's no one otherwise minded, gone. Right.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that the application has been refused on the grounds as detailed in the report.
I'll let Councillor Campbell back in.
Space at the Oasis Youth Centre, Young Terrace, Dumfries.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. This application is before you today because it's a council application that involves the change of use of land. The application, it's not very clear actually, and that is a red line boundary at the rear of the Oasis Youth Centre. The the area is sandwiched between two sections that project from the rear of the building. This is a layout of the outdoor learning area. It shows what they're proposing in the site, but my other slides show in more detail what they're proposing. You can see that the area is currently, from the overview photo, you can see the area is currently a parking area for 6 vehicles. There's a dashed line on the boundary of the parking area where a fence would be. This is the proposed equipment within the site. And this is an example of the covered wooden shelter that would be proposed within the area, and the just standard bench recycled plastic seating. So this is the first photo of the area itself. You can see there's some cars parked there at the moment. To the left of that parking area, you can see there's an area there's a metal security fence, and that's the fence for the police compound to the rear of the police station. Across from the parking area, there's existing parking. On consultation with the council roads officer, he confirmed that there would be a suitable manoeuvring space for the fence to be erected and the cars to still use the car parking area opposite. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, thank you.
I was just going to add.
This one? Or is it that one? Oh, sorry.
The photograph of the equipment. Thank you. I was just trying to work out what outdoor learning was in that. It looks like a gymnasium to me.
Yeah, it's a gym. It's like an outdoor gym for them, I think.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, just like Councillor Blake, when you think of learning, you don't just think of gym equipment. I mean, is there other sort of facilities, you know, that you know, people can use some kind of learning rather than sort of gym equipment?
I think that it includes a outdoor covered area as well, which may facilitate outdoor learning. I think with it being a youth centre, it's maybe partly recreational as well, with the gym equipment in it for them. Area 2 is where the equipment would be with the canopy over, and area 4 is the covered area, covered seating area.
Any other questions for the case officers? Now in session. Archie? Pauline first. I'll let Pauline.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Chair. This is not a question. I hope you don't mind me just making a statement, a point of interest. I think it's applaudable that we're still investing money in Dumfries, but I'm very protective, as we all know, of my own areas. And, you know, we have nothing in Kirkcudbrightshire to this level, never mind a youth group with any equipment whatsoever. So in the future, I'd really be keen, and I'm sure Councillor Maitland would agree with me, that in the future, hopefully we can see projects such as this. It's just a statement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pauline. I'm sure you'll lobby all the relevant committees to try and get funding for your area, but the application in front of us. Okay, Archie?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think we all want more equipment for our area, and if we get more younger people involved, there are more opportunities for them to get involved. But to come back to the planning application, quite happy to go with the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Archie. Ivor?
Just remind me, what kind of fencing was it that's going around it again?
Carla?
It's 3 metre high security like mesh fence, and it's the applicant from the council. He said it's the similar fencing to what they use in schools, the green plastic coated fencing.
Okay, Ivor.
I was hoping it was just a low one, because then rather than paying DG1 to do Jim, you could have nipped over the fence and got in.
Thank you, Jane.
So I'm sorry, I'd actually sort of missed this. And it says there is going to be a fence right across the front, is what you're saying. Has anybody thought about putting something in the north side? I mean, you know how gloomy this is here. I think in terms of design, I think it's probably completely potty, myself. We have in front what we've got, and we've got to deal with physical planning, and that's what we're talking about. But I really do wonder whether putting something in the shadow of a building of this sort of nature is actually really very sensible practice.
Well, you could put your points across once we're in session if you're not happy with that, Jane.
Well, I thought we were. Beg your pardon, I thought we were.
Well, we're in session. Archie, have you... just go with the recommendations. Are we agreed on that? Okay, thank you. Tracy, could you just remind us what we've agreed on?
Thank you, Chairman. Application has been approved unconditionally.
Thank you very much. I have no further business, and thank you for your attendance.
We could remind Councillor Maitland that the sun does go